I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
We are continuing our look through 60 years of Doctor Who. This time, we are landing on the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton. Last time we talked about first Doctor William Hartnell. When William Hartnell started getting ill, there was a choice to be made. And it was a very hard choice because it would impact the rest of the series. And they made the choice to recast the lead in their most popular show, the BBC, which can make or break a show, and we've seen many since either make or break based off that. William Hartnell's final story was The 10th Planet, which unfortunately we do not have all of those episodes in the archive. The only part of episode 4 that we know for sure that we have is the regeneration scene. And that's only because it was used in an episode of Blue Peter for the 10th anniversary of Doctor Who in 73. So thank you, Blue Peter, for that.
Yeah, it's interesting that that we have that whole sequence in its entirety thanks to a kids show. A different kids show, you know.
It means that at one point this episode was in the archive. It just got junked at some point between the airing of that Blue Peter episode and when they decided, hey, maybe we should actually keep up these episodes of our most popular show.
Yeah, it is unbelievable to people of our generation who, you know, I still have videotapes in my possession of things I recorded when I was a kid off of TV. You know?
Mm-hmm.
You know, episodes of X-Files, it's stuff, you know, stuff you can buy professionally, and I still have recordings because they were so important to me. It is absolutely mind-boggling to me that there was ever a time when someone could go, yeah, nobody will ever want to see this again.
Yeah, especially, you know, I mean, then they figured out, oh, VHS players are a thing. People are going to want to buy all these old shows. Oh, we don't have them. And
there is very little in my life that I've ever seen, and I mean very little, that you could ask me, do you ever want to see that again? And my answer would be no.
But back then, again, that was a time before VHS players, before home video, where they could not make any more money after airing this once or twice. You know, nowadays, reruns actually do make a lot of money. There are entire channels dedicated to airing old television shows. And, you know, prior to streaming, people were buying complete collections of their favorite TV shows. Just there was a time where that was not a thing. And the powers that be thought this, you know, that's not going to work. No one's ever going to want that. I mean, imagine showing those people today. There are people who are watching old television shows. How many times do you see a day people are on their umpteenth rewatch of The Office or
Yeah.
any other, can you imagine?
Or now the idea of I put on this show that I've seen 700 times because that's what I watch when I go to bed.
Or what I watch
Or
to unwind after a busy day at work or whatever. I'm in a
that's what I
bad
watch while
mood.
I'm doing the dishes, or that's what I watch while I'm cleaning the house, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Those people will be blowing their minds. Like, why are they watching old television? They should be watching new television. No, comfort food. These shows are their comfort food.
Or
But
they should be watching the old television that we've remade into new television.
yeah, why are you watching this old movie? We just remade the movie so you don't have to do that.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, it's just wild of me for me to think that there was ever a time when anybody would be like, yeah, nobody would. And the same thing with me for books. I know people who read a book and then they go, well, I'm never gonna want that again, and then they throw it away or give it away, or I'm like, no, it's a book. You keep it. That's what bookshelves are for. But anyway, fact that we have that. Thank you, Blue Peter, because it's an important moment in television history,
The
in
first
science fiction
regeneration, yeah.
history. Yeah, the first regeneration of the Doctor. So at least we have that footage. We had the audio thanks to some fans who they couldn't record the visuals, but they did have audio recording equipment. So they put that up next to the television and recorded the audio. So we were able to, a company has started animating based on old scripts and the audio that we had, thanks to fans. And we have these animated versions that have been reconstructed by putting those two things together. So you can watch a version of a lot of these missing serials, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, it's better than nothing.
Yeah.
And even if the animation isn't your cup of tea, they have released these audio versions of the episodes in a soundtrack format, so you can listen to them as an audiobook.
Yeah.
So
And a lot of places have the scripts posted so that you can, read along and listen along, so you can see the stage directions and what the visual information would be.
and some of them have narrations. I mean, Fraser Hines, who we'll talk about in a minute, did a lot of the second Doctor audios.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So there are a lot of ways to get some of the missing serials. Not all of them, unfortunately, but a lot of them have been preserved in some kind of format or another, either by reading the scripts or reading summaries of what happened that we still have.
And in some cases, fans have done what has been referred to as telesnap reconstructions, taking essentially screenshots, some of them officially by the BBC, and trying to match them up to the audio track that we just talked about. So you can gotta kind of have a pseudo visual audio thing going on. And again, for a long time, that was the only way to watch the missing episodes of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Some of them are still out there too.
Yeah, because some of them have not been fully animated yet. It is a massive project. The sad thing about it is that a lot of the Patrick Troughton years were lost to the BBC junking practice. We fortunately have the clip that is the first appearance of his face, but that was right at the end of the episode, and you don't hear him speak.
Yeah, and unfortunately, sadly, his entire first story is lost. That would be Power of the Daleks. Thankfully, that has been animated, so you can watch a version of that if you'd like.
But the reason that we're talking about Tomb of the Cybermen and not the first appearance of the Cybermen is that, of course, that was lost. And then the next appearance of the Cybermen was also lost.
The moon base, yeah.
The moon base. And so Tomb of the Cybermen is the first serial with the Cybermen that we actually have the full footage for. It is also one of the two remaining serials that we fully have for the appearance of Victoria Waterfield, one of the Doctor's companions.
Yeah, the other being Enemy of the World, which was the last lost episode to be found. That was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So as we get further and further away from the 1960s, it's going to be harder and harder, if not near impossible, to find any of these missing episodes, if they still exist.
Sadly, that's going to be true. The people who might have had them, either it's going to be too degraded to restore, or the people who find them will probably just not know what it is and will throw it away as the people who had them pass. And it's going to be tragic. Then again, sometimes miracles happen, as recently, within the last few years, somebody just found the original work print of Manos Hands of Fate in like a garage sale. So weird things have happened regarding lost media. So I wouldn't give up all hope, but it is tenuous hope, I admit.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as Victoria goes, we don't have her first story, which was intended to be the final Dalek story.
Yeah, Terry Nation. We mentioned this in the last Doctor Who episode. The Terry Nation, creator of the Daleks. He's even more of a creator of the Daleks than Davros is.
Yeah.
He wanted to do a Dalek TV show. And he was going to go to America and make this happen. And part of that, it was he took back the permission for BBC to use the Daleks in Doctor Who, so he can do this Dalek TV show, which never happened, unfortunately. But
I honestly think, fortunately.
You don't think the Daleks could have survived on their own as a TV show without the Doctor?
It's possible, but one, I do not want to see what Americans would have done with the Daleks. And two, I want the Daleks in Doctor Who. Like, I don't want to see them separated from that universe. So I'm glad it never happened. I'm glad that whatever went on there just never kind of took hold.
Somewhere in the multiverse, the Daleks TV show was a hit, and the Time War happened with the Cybermen.
Yeah, but, while he was off trying to sell, pepper pot robots to America, and I'm sure the Americans were completely baffled at that point, it was probably the thing that they brought on this other guy who was the new scientific advisor. The entire behind the scenes crew had changed by the time Patrick Troughton had come on. We talked before about the original team.
Verity Lambert, Sydney Newman.
Yeah, and both of them had left by this point to go do other things. So the team in charge at this point brought in a guy named Kip Pedler, who was a scientist and also a writer, and wanted him to bring a more science-based center to their science fiction show now that they had given up on it being a educational historical thing, and they had just fully embraced the science fiction weirdness. They were like, well, at least if it's going to be a kids show, let's get a little bit of science in it, and brought in this science advisor. And they were like, we need to create something to kind of take the place of the Daleks and be the new menace. And he came up with the idea of the Cybermen.
Yeah, and the Cybermen themselves are very unique characters. We first see the Cybermen in William Hartnell's final story, The 10th Planet, which we find out that Earth has a twin planet called Mondas that was knocked out of its orbit, and it sailed into the universe because science fiction. The people on that...
Also, I will say that also that was a really big kind of conspiracy theory at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't pulling that out of nowhere. There had been a lot of sort of pseudoscientific speculation, and sometimes there still is. It will continue to pop up in conspiracy theories now. There are still people who believe that idea, that there is a secret twin planet to Earth just out of our sight, and someday it's gonna, the orbit is gonna change and it's gonna cause all kind of havoc for Earth. So it was more on the border of, is that actual science that we haven't discovered yet at the time that they were writing that episode. So it didn't come out of completely nowhere. There was still some possible scientific speculation that has now been completely debunked. We know enough about our solar system now that scientists are like, yeah, that is completely impossible. We have mapped the entire solar system. But at the time, it was still maybe possible that we just haven't seen it. But, you know, it was a kind of interesting theory people had for a while that was still in the range of possible science fiction.
So as Mondas is sailing out of orbit, they lose heat, they lose their resources die. The Mondasians decide that the only way for them to survive is to become cybernetic creatures, calling themselves the Cybermen. And the Cybermen come back to Earth because they want their world back. They want to get rid of Earth and put Mondas back there. They take on the Doctor and his companions. And thanks to Mondas gaining too much energy from the Earth, it explodes, and the Cybermen seemingly die. The entire adventure takes a little too much toll on the first Doctor, and after a nice little Christmas adventure with his future self, he regenerates into Patrick Troughton. Had to put that in there.
For those of you who have not seen the episode, that was a joke. No, he just collapses on the floor of the TARDIS, and then
we haven't gotten that part of the series yet.
Yeah, crossfades into Patrick Troughton. It's interesting how little, because regenerations are such a big deal now. It is interesting how little build up that scene has.
Yeah, now regeneration episodes have this big hype about it, and it's hyped around the regeneration. Like when Tennant left, that was a big deal. When Smith left, that was a big deal. When Capaldi left, that was a big deal.
And you'll build up for several episodes, or the entire episode will be a build up as the current Doctor kind of fades or feels themselves, getting weaker, and they know that something is coming, or you can feel it building to a big tragedy or a big goodbye. And other than the fact that the doctor had passed out in the previous episode, which had a very sad real world thing, which was that William Hartnell really did pass out on set and had to not be present for the third episode in that serial. And so they wrote the doctor out and just said he fainted from the stress. And then when he came back, he was like, "Oh, I feel much better." But when he got to the TARDIS, he was like, "I'm feeling weak again." And he passes out on the floor.
Wearing a bit thin.
And then they do a kind of camera crossfade from one face into another. And it's a cliffhanger. And you're like, well, why did that happen? And then in the next episode, he's like,
I've been renewed.
They don't even call it regeneration at that point. It's just, he's like, oh, I was feeling a little weak and tired, so I renewed myself. This is me now. Moving on.
And that was a point of contention for a lot of people. Like, is this the Doctor now? The Doctor isn't acting like the Doctor we knew, because this was uncharted territory. And as a way to keep the fans, they did a Dalek episode because we were at the tail end of Dalek Mania. So Power of the Daleks being the first story featuring Troughton to kind of get people in and get people used to Troughton as the Doctor. Troughton coming in, he had different ideas of how he wanted to play the Doctor, because the producers wanted this Doctor to be fundamentally different than Hartnell's Doctor. It was actually Cindy Newman that came up with, as he puts it, the cosmic hobo, because he was a big fan of Charlie Chaplin and wanted Troughton to kind of be cosmic Charlie Chaplin. And so you kind of see it in Troughton's look, the baggy pants, the unkept shirt, the loose bow tie, the suit jacket that kind of needs a wash, the unkempt hair. And it kind of works for that. It kind of works for his Doctor.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that then they went and cast Fraser Hines as his most constant companion, a man who started his career in a Charlie Chaplin movie. He was a child actor, and he worked with Charlie Chaplin in a movie called King of New York.
Fraser Hines is Jamie McCrimmon, our Scottish Highlander, in The Highlanders, which was the very next serial to come after this. So right after taking care of the Daleks, here comes Jamie, and Jamie ended up being the second Doctor's most loyal companion from this point up until Troughton left. And Hines and Troughton, they've been friends for many years before this. They worked together before. Hines was supposed to be a one-off just for the serial, and I guess as some sort of favor to Troughton, they kept him on, and it's just those two are inseparable. For the rest of Troughton's time, it's been two and Jamie.
Yeah. And interestingly enough, Jamie did give us another interesting television Scotsman, which is that an author named Diana Gabaldon was watching Doctor Who in the 70s and thought, this is interesting. I like that Scottish guy. His name is Jamie. And when she later wrote her books called the Outlander series, she gave her sexy Scottish hero the name Jamie. And interestingly, gave him the last name of Fraser, which turned out to just be a coincidence because she said that the PBS station that she watched Doctor Who on always cut off the credits of Doctor Who, so she didn't know that the actor's name was Fraser Hines until years later when somebody was like, wait, did you also name him after Fraser Hines? And she was like, no, I just like the name Fraser.
So yeah, we were the next appearance of the Cybermen would be in the moon base, which happened 4 months later. That is a quick turnaround, especially in this era of Doctor Who, where that means they were starting to plan and write the moon base story while or even before the 10th planet was even airing.
Well, I mean, if you want to turn the Cybermen into the next Daleks, you better start having them on the show a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And we find out that some Cybermen have somehow survived all of this, and they are on the moon, and they want to control Earth's weather because in this timeline, Earth has colonized the moon and are using it to adjust the weather.
Why not?
That's another conspiracy theory right there. They eventually beat the Cybermen in that one as well, which brings us to Evil of the Daleks, which is where we introduce Victoria Waterfield, who was the daughter of someone who was killed by the Daleks, leaving her an orphan.
He was researching time travel, and the Daleks were like, yeah, we don't like that. But she's a proper Victorian lady. The interesting thing is that a lot of the Second Doctor's companions are not from the modern time period of the show.
With the exception of Ben and Polly, but those were leftovers from the first Doctor era.
Yeah, but the ones that the Second Doctor picks for himself are breaking with the tradition of having a modern viewpoint into the show. That had always been the viewer's, kind of point, was that they could have at least one character in the TARDIS that would at least say, like, well, in my time,
or use modern slang and stuff like that,
Yeah, in the modern day England that I am from, and then the viewer watching on the BBC could be like, yeah, in our time we would never do that, But
so, yeah, we get Jamie, who's back in the Scottish Highlands, Victoria from Victoria in England, and later we get Zoe, who's from the future.
Yeah. So Jamie comes from the they find him in just after the Battle of Culloden, which was in 1746. So, 1700s Scotland. And yeah, then Victorian England, there. I think they say 1866 is where they pull her from specifically. So, yeah, I mean, these are they're about 100 years apart from each other, but they're also very much not the 1960s audience that would be watching the Second Doctor.
But they quickly put them in 1960s dress.
Well, they put Victoria almost immediately in 1960s dress because this particular episode, the first episode of the Tomb of the Cybermen serial, we get her introduction to the TARDIS. She walks into the TARDIS and does the whole, oh, it's bigger on the inside and all that the companions always do. And the Doctor immediately says, like, oh, you're still in giant Victorian corset and skirts and all that. You will be very uncomfortable on our adventures if you continue wearing that. Jamie, why don't you go show her where she can find something more appropriate? And she returns in a modern 1960s women's dress with women's heels for the time period. So she immediately looks like a modern woman. Jamie, however, is still wearing his kilt.
He's wearing a modern sweater, though.
Well, in that serial, he is wearing a more modern men's shirt. So I will give him that, but he is still wearing his kilt presumably from the battle that he brought with him, and he is wearing shoes and long socks that are slightly more modern, so I'll give him that too. The socks at least are more modern because he doesn't have anything to hold him up.
But keeping the kilt.
But yeah, I mean, it's like Jamie is very much I never shall trousers touch my legs.
Jamie, where's your trousers?
Yeah, I really give it to Jamie, and I also give it to the doctor because Victoria seems initially very uncomfortable, as a Victorian woman would, in a dress so short. So when the doctor kind of says like, "Oh, I see you've changed clothes," and she remarks that her dress seems very short, he turns around and says, she says like, "My dress, don't you think the skirt is a little bit short?" And he says, "Oh, nonsense, look at Jamie's," because the hem of Jamie's kilt is shorter than the hem of Victoria's dress. And Jamie immediately does that thing of like, it's not a skirt, it's a kilt. But he kind of stops himself in the middle and goes like, "Oh, aye, yeah." Like, yes, you are correct.
The hem of my kilt is shorter than her skirt. It's fair.
Well, no, it's he immediately tries to do the thing that so many men do of like, it's not a skirt, it's a kilt. But honestly, a kilt is just a pleated skirt. I mean, it's just like it's just a skirt. Like, there's nothing wrong with that statement, you know? It's just a particular type of skirt that is specifically worn by men of Scottish descent in particular situations. There is nothing wrong with that. And I kind of like that Jamie kind of stops himself in the middle and just goes like, "Yeah, no, you're right. It's a skirt. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't care. Moving on."
And this opening scene is another first. This is the first time we hear the doctor's age, where he says he is 450 years old. Oh, he's so young back then.
I know. It was kind of cute hearing him be like, "Oh no, I must be about in Earth years I would be like 450, I suppose." Like, and I was like, "Oh, you baby, so adorable."
We get Tennant saying he's 900. We got Smith saying he's 1,000. Capaldi says he's 2,000. 450 is a baby.
Yeah, I know. It's really, really cute. The interesting thing is that not only is this one called Tomb of the Cybermen, so it's the audience is immediately like, "Oh yeah, we're doing Cybermen," but we see a group of humans in a quarry. It's all right, everybody. We're in a quarry. You can relax. It's going to be a good episode. We're properly in a quarry. This group of humans is like, "Oh, let's blast away a bit of rock, and there's a door. Let's go up to the door." And just on the door are carvings of Cybermen. So, and very obviously Cybermen. Like, they're not trying to hide it.
Yes.
So the audience is immediately like, "Okay, we're screwed."
Yes, this episode takes place on the planet Telos, which later in the episode we find out that after the Doctor destroyed their planet, and they specifically said, after you destroyed our planet, we had to find a new world, We found Telos, and here we are. Which,
But the interesting thing is that this is several hundred years in the future, because the first encounter with Cybermen took place in the far-flung future of 1986.
Woo!
So we are told that the Cybermen in this one have been entombed for over 500 years, I think they say. It has been at least that long since the last encounter with the Cybermen in the timeline.
They even mentioned the moon base. So that's why you were at the moon base. You need this. So we are technically in chronological order of the Cybermen for now. That will change as we get further through the classic series.
Yeah. The fascinating thing is that the Doctor lands right after this expedition, which is supposedly archaeological. They're just like, oh, we found this tomb, we're going to open it. And they say that the Cybermen all died out 500 years ago, and the second Doctor and Jamie wander up, and they're immediately like, Cybermen, bad, nope, goodbye. We are not opening this door. And Victoria's like, what's a Cyberman? They're like, hey, you remember the Daleks? Like that, but, really, really bad, and they can walk. And she's like, oh yeah, no, that sounds bad. Let's not do this.
Yeah, one thing I want to note before we really deep dive into this is that this is a straight up takeoff of the Mummy type of story. A mysterious tomb in a mysterious desert. And you know what? I think everyone has seen at least one incarnation of the Mummy, and you know what happens after that.
Yeah, I mean, this is just archaeologists digging around where they shouldn't. And, somebody there is not who they claim to be, and they have ulterior motives for going grave robbing. I mean, yeah, it's a pretty basic plot, but Doctor Who. And honestly, Doctor Who has done this plot multiple times in 60 years. But this was the first time, really, that Doctor Who kind of did this plot, I think. This is a trope as old as tropes. I mean, It's just, you dig something up that you shouldn't have dug up. I mean, this is also the story of Aladdin, it just, maybe you leave that thing buried in the desert, You dig far enough into any story and you're going to find connections like that. So I'm not going to ding it too hard for that. But yeah, this is kind of basically a Mummy story. The doors are electrified because they're big metal doors built into a mountain. And
poor unnamed crewman just tried, I'll open it, and then electrified and died. Poor unnamed crewman, we hardly knew ye.
I love that this expedition of multiple nationalities of people with all kinds of different accents are using the British pound. Because the woman who really wants inside the tomb is like, 50 pounds to the first person that can open that door. So I love this international crew, hundreds of years into the future, are using the British pound.
The pound is somehow still active thousands of years, however many years from now this is, 500.
Yeah, they're not going like really sci-fi on it and saying like credits or,
Yeah. Our little expeditioners here the Cybermen have set up this series of logic puzzles. So, yeah, Keeg here, who's like the financial backer or whatever of this expedition, claims to be like this highly intelligent man. His group, the logicians, what a name, are, they're the smartest people on Earth. And for someone who claims to be one of the smartest people on Earth, can't figure out these logic puzzles to get into the actual tomb, The Doctor figures it out because he is the Doctor, and all of these logic puzzles are 100% techno-babble gobbledygook, but it works because it's Doctor Who. But I think that's the point, is that Keeg says he's the smartest man, but he can't figure it out, but he still goes on and on about how smart he is, and the Cybermen needs his intelligence to prosper.
Well, I think that the other thing that's funny about it too is that the Doctor just kind of sits there and very easily solves these puzzles in the way that you would tell a child, like, maybe the circle goes into the circle-shaped hole, like...
It goes in the square hole.
Yeah, it was like, it's the way that you talk to like a 3-year-old trying to put together like their first little puzzle, But then the Doctor also gives him the warning of, but you shouldn't do it because bad things will happen. And the guy's like, no, I have figured it out. I am the smartest, But which I think is very funny. But also, I think that it's also showing that humans would not have gotten there without the hubris of the Doctor. The Doctor just had to point out how much smarter he was than this guy, which is a frequent failing of the Doctor. The Doctor does in most of his incarnations, especially in these early years, like to show off how smart he is for the lowly humans. And frequently that gives him into trouble.
He needs an audience, let's be real. The Doctor needs an audience to show how clever he is.
Yeah, and it leads to a lot of bad things. Like, if the Doctor had just looked at it and been like, oh, yes, you should keep working on this logic puzzle, like, the guy would have probably never gotten through. And there's a lot of times when you see the Doctor, like, the guy is going like, oh, yes, if I push this button and this button over here, and then as soon as his back is turned, the Doctor will, like, move a lever or push a button or whatever that he's missed. And that'll be the thing that opens the door. And the guy will be like, yes, I knew that was the solution, but really it was the Doctor. And I was like, Doctor, if you'd have just kept your fingers off the controls, the thing wouldn't have opened and you wouldn't have released the Cybermen. Like, but can we maybe not do that?
But the Doctor even says he's there for the same reason they are. He's there to see, but he's there to make sure the Cybermen stay frozen, stay in this tomb, while everyone else is, well, we're going to free the Cybermen. We're going to do this, that, and the other. And
well, you know what would have kept the Cybermen frozen in the tomb? Not pushing those buttons.
Yeah, but the Doctor has to be the Doctor, no matter whose face he has.
I know, the plot has to happen, but sometimes you just gotta be like, you know what would have helped? If you'd have just gotten in the TARDIS and left. If you'd have just been like, oh, those look like Cybermen statues. I'm gonna go.
90% of Doctor Who episodes should just end with the Doctor saying nope and getting the TARDIS and getting out of there, to the point where writers have to find a way to make sure they can't get to the TARDIS.
Yeah.
We need to write the TARDIS out of the show.
If Doctor Who was nope, I think the universe would be a lot safer. That's what we need. We need Daniel Kaluuya in the TARDIS. Daniel Kaluuya just walks out of the TARDIS, sees a carving of a Cyberman, just like, nope, and then just walks back into the TARDIS. Yeah, the end of episode. It's like a 2-minute episode. Just Kiki Palmer walks out of the TARDIS and goes like, no, I'm not here for this. Bye. Best companion ever. But yeah, the Doctor causes more trouble than he helps sometimes. So of course the Doctor has to help the guy figure out the logic puzzles, and things start happening, including the
People
we have a
dying.
whole, well, yeah, people dying, but that wasn't the Doctor's fault. That was
Technically,
Jamie.
Jamie's.
And well, Jamie didn't know what was going to happen.
Technically, Jamie was hypnotized during that point.
Yeah, him and another member of the expedition were in a control room, and the whole problem with this expedition is, spoiler alert, there are two evil people in this expedition who are part of this brotherhood of logicians that were there to wake the Cybermen. Everybody else they just think they're there on a normal archaeological expedition. Like, we're gonna go to this tomb, we're gonna dig up the bodies of Cybermen or whatever, and we're gonna find out how they died. Maybe take some bits and put them in a museum. Normal archaeology stuff. Okay? The two evil people are like, oh, we're going to go resurrect the Cybermen and make a deal with them and gain power and take over the world. Normal evil people stuff.
Okay, so here is my thing that they do not consider. Now, this is not a flaw of the episode, but a flaw of the characters and their own hubris. Keegan and Catan are two human villains for this story. What do the Cybermen gain by aligning themselves with human logicians that they couldn't already do on their own, besides freeing the Cybermen, getting them the energy they need? Why would they care about the logicians trying to start the New World Order? And I'm not talking the one with Hulk Hogan.
The thing is that this is the flaw in every collaborator. Collaborators always think that they'll be the exception. I call it the Shirley exception. Surely they'll make an exception for me.
Don't call me Shirley.
So even if, yes, in that sense, even if they understand, which I think that they might not fully understand what the Cybermen are, but even if they do, like, Cybermen want to convert everyone to Cybermen, okay? Even if they understand that, the collaborator always thinks, but surely they'll make an exception for me because I provide them something that the other can't, okay?
Surely the Cougars biting your face party aren't going to bite my face off.
Yeah, it's that meme. But as we all know, that it will bite your face off. That's the whole point. So if you ally with a group who are like, I hate everybody that looks like you, and you're like, well, that seems all right. If I could get on your side, you'll make an exception for me. Like, eventually, they're going to turn on you too. They've already told you they're going to do that. So if the Cybermen are like, we want to convert all humans into Cybermen, and you're like, hey, I'll help you do that, eventually there's going to come a point where you're still a human and they're going to want to convert you into a Cyberman. Okay? It might be now, it might be later, but eventually it's going to happen.
And that happens in every Cyberman story, that a human allies with them up until the modern day, where surely I'll be the exception. I will be staying a human. No, you're going to get converted, which leads me to talk about the awesome cliffhanger of episode 2, where they unfreeze the tomb and you see the Cybermen breaking through that plastic shielding, and they're all coming out of the ice, and we see the cyber leader. But this is the first time we've ever seen a cyber leader in the show.
Yeah, the introduction of the cyber controller.
Yeah. Also the introduction of the Cybermats, but we haven't gotten to them yet. But and the cyber leader looking at our Keeg here, and Keeg is telling him, "You're alive because of us. You will work for us. We are your saviors." And then the cyber controller looks at him and says, "You will be like us. You will become one of us." And the very robotic, it wouldn't have been a filter back then, would it? No.
Yeah, I mean it's
The
that
modulator,
kind
whatever.
of modulator vocoder, whatever they're using to make that sound.
Which at the end of the second episode is great, but they upped the pitch in the third episode, and I had to turn on the subtitles because I couldn't understand the dang thing they were saying.
Yeah, it is kind of difficult if you have any sort of, audio processing or hearing loss or anything like that. It is really difficult to understand what any of the Cybermen are saying throughout this. They've mostly found a good balance in the way they do the voices now for both the Daleks and the Cybermen in the current series.
Shout out Nicholas Briggs.
Yeah, the modulation is a little less harsh and it's a little more understandable, but in the old audio, it's so difficult to understand what they're saying a lot of times. So thank you to all of the captioners who worked so hard to make sure that people like me can understand them. But yeah, the look on when they come back into the third episode and you see Klieg being like, "Oh my goodness, what is going on?" Like, no, I'm the smart one. I'm the one that saved you. You owe me. And they're like, "We don't owe you anything. You will be one of us,"
You have fear, you have emotions, we will take care of that.
Yeah. And eventually he's like, "No, but I'm really smart. Look at me with the big brain." And they're like, "Okay, fine. We will make you cyber controller of the new race of Cybermen." And he's like, "Yeah, that's not really any better. Still don't want to have my brain cut out and put in a robot." And they're like, "We don't care."
Although I will say that the voices of the Cybermen in this story, maybe I'm in the minority, is a lot better than the original Cybermen voices, the ones that they would reuse for the 12th Doctor, the one that sounds in a very sing-song voice. What are these emotions you speak of?
Honestly, I kind of like that one better. I prefer that voice.
Eh,
I mean, I do, because at least it modulates and it makes the audio easier for me to understand personally.
fair enough.
But yeah. So we've got, the thing is that I had a bit of problems with the villains because Klieg, you can kind of get his thing. He's the guy who thinks too much of his own intelligence. But the one I didn't really get is, what is Kaftan getting out of this? The woman that's with them,
She seems to be the real one in charge, because there's that one scene where she kind of manipulates Klieg into going back and addressing the Cybermen again.
yeah, she seems to be the one that's actually in control. She wanders around like she's really in charge of things. But I don't understand what her motivation is.
I think she's also a logician. It seems seemingly that she is. And at least, her and Klieg are in cahoots together, and she's the one that stays behind in the first few episodes. She's the one that poisons Victoria's drink, and
and locks Victoria in the cyber rejuvenation thing and tries to turn her into a Cyberman or something. I don't know what her plan was there. But she's the first one that we see that we're like, oh, she's the evil one. And we don't really figure that Klieg is the evil one until later when he's actually waking up the Cybermen. But the thing is that I don't understand her personal motivation, except that we are both part of this group. Like, Klieg is very much like, I want power. I want to be in control of the Cybermen. I want to give them orders. I want to rule the world. And she's just like, yeah, we're both part of this organization. And I'm also here.
She's evil because she has a sort of German accent. That's as far as
Yeah, and so does he. I mean, that seems to be their kind of their motivating factor is that we're vaguely German. And then, of course, we haven't mentioned the one really problematic bit of the episode, which is that Kaftan, the woman with the vaguely German accent, has a large black man named Toberman who seems to be her servant.
Yeah,
I'm going to use the term servant.
That's what they use in the episode, yeah.
Yeah.
Toberman, okay.
He barely says anything, and he just follows her around silently and does whatever she says.
And his introduction in the episode, the first thing we see of Toberman is he has to be told not to walk off a cliff. So they're already setting up Toberman as not all that bright. Even at the end of the episode, the doctor has to tell him how to be moral. The Cybermen are evil. We destroy evil. Destroy evil.
I'm really hoping that like kind of Frankenstein monster voice that they gave him at the end was due to him being like halfway through a cyber conversion. And not like the only external thing we see of the cyber conversion is that he now has one arm that has like metal on it and like a lobster claw hand like the other Cybermen. But I'm really hoping that we're supposed to think that his speech being kind of stunted and not being able to use full sentences was part of the cyber conversion as well. Please, please, please let that be what they were trying to get across. Because the other is just too awful to think about.
Especially considering this is all, I mean, I get that this is England, but at the same time this episode is airing in the United States, we're going through the civil rights movement. Yeah.
And one of the first black actors on Doctor Who ever had only appeared like a few serials before in the first Cyberman episode ever. So yeah, I mean, we're not that far into finally having black people on Doctor Who just at all, and this is the representation we get. And that first guy was an astronaut.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was really decent representation. He was presented as like a scientist and
and any other person of color that we've seen on Doctor Who at this point has been brown face and yellow face.
Yeah.
And that even goes up until the early 1980s. So yeah, that's gonna be fun if we ever do those. No. Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. Fourth Doctor fans, we are not doing the Talons of Wang Chiang.
Yeah.
We are not.
But back to this guy. I'm just going to try to say hopefully that's what they were doing there. But
Toberman could have been so much better. Like, if he was just like the silent bodyguard type, it would have made his character so much better than just
a bodyguard. Like,
Yeah.
just give him 3 or 4 lines and he can be a bodyguard. It's fine to have. He is a very large, muscular man. It's fine to just be like, this is my bodyguard.
Especially since our two villains are supposed to be very wealthy financiers of this expedition.
And part of their evil thing is we want the physical might of the Cybermen because we're very smart, but we're not very powerful physically. I mean, that's fine to be like, look, we had to pay a dude to be our bodyguard because we are small and weak. It's fine. That's part of their character arc, is like, we want an army of big, strong, robotic, cybernetic people. Okay, cool. That's fine. Just give Toberman like 2 or 3 lines. Okay, that's fine. He's a bodyguard. Fine. Rich people have bodyguards. It's okay.
And that would have made his character 100 times more better than what we got in this episode.
Yeah. But and of course, he's the only person we see like undergo cyber conversion. So also, a little problematic. But,
there is a great scene in episode 3 here. I want to talk about that for a minute. Is that the Doctor, this is where we see, more of the fatherly, grandfatherly version of the Doctor here, where he's concerned about Victoria. Like, are you okay, Victoria? You haven't traveled, but this is your first adventure with us. Are you okay? And she decides, she goes on about, how she misses her father, that if it wasn't for the Daleks, she would have her dad. Her father would still be alive. And she's still grieving over the loss of her father. And she kind of makes a joke, well, Doctor, you're so old, you probably don't even remember your family, which he takes it as an insult. But, there's that night, it shows some great acting by Troughton, where he goes, of course you'll miss your father. I miss my family too, but in time you'll forget about the pain. I can see my family anytime I want to, but the rest of the time they sleep in the back of my mind, and it'll happen to you as well because we're going to go on all of these great adventures together. Which,
yeah, it was such a nice thing about, grief and memory, and how at the beginning those memories are so fresh that it's all you can think about, because that's the chunk of your memory,
It just happened to her.
Yeah, it just happened. But he's talking about how many new and happy memories they're going to make together, and how much more life she has in front of her. And as that grows, the grieving, the time of grieving will be a lesser chunk in her memory. Which is such an interesting way to think about it, and especially when you're explaining it to children.
And Victoria is supposed to be a young teenager at this point in the series.
Yeah.
So she would be a little bit older than the general child audience that would be watching Doctor Who at this point.
Yeah, and she is kind of not a replacement, but she is kind of stepping in for, like, Susan,
Mm.
And when you talk about the way children experience time, time seems to move more slowly for them because every year of their life is so big a chunk of their life as a whole to that point. You know? When you're 10 years old, every year you've lived is a tenth of your life. That's a huge chunk of time to you. So years seem to stretch on forever. But as you get older and you go, man, where did the year go? Well, it's because it's becoming a smaller and smaller chunk of your life as a whole, you know? And then decades become a more manageable chunk of time to you because that becomes a bigger chunk of a percentage of your life, you know? And it's a very fascinating way to talk about grief to a child, you know? Like, you don't remember this morning so much because that was a very small amount of time to you. But you remember last year being forever because that's a big chunk of time to you, you know? And so that's a fascinating way to talk about how grief forms in your memory. And as you go on, that time of grief will just take up a smaller and smaller amount of your memory. It is such a beautiful moment, and that one stuck out to me too. You're right. Just this quiet little moment in the middle of all this chaos.
And we don't really see that even in later series of the classic era or even the modern era, where a character will just slow the story down and say, are you doing okay? How are you? How are you doing in this very dangerous situation we're in? Granted, because we don't have the time to do that anymore, especially in the modern series, since these are 1 hour episodes and we got to get through really fast. But for these earlier series, which are 4 episodes or more, to take that time and have that conversation, especially with children watching at home, it's a nice touch, and it really does add character to the Doctor. That he's still that deep inside, he's still a little bit of that grandpa figure that we saw with the original Doctor.
Yeah, I really liked that bit. I think what I like about Troughton's version of the Doctor most is that he's so much funnier. I mean, the humor of the Doctor would become one of his defining traits over the years. And people think about it a lot with, you know, when we get to like Fourth Doctor and, you know, but I think that Troughton is highly underrated, and I think it's just because so much of his stuff got lost.
Troughton has been such an inspiration to so many other actors who played the Doctor. Like you said, Tom Baker, Sylvester McCoy especially. When we get to Sylvester McCoy, you will see a lot of the Troughton influence, and especially Matt Smith, amazingly enough. And I'm not just talking about the bow tie.
Yeah.
Troughton talks a lot with his hands. Matt Smith has incorporated that into his version of the Doctor, and especially, you know, the clown. There's a lot of that in Matt Smith's Doctor.
The way he jokes around with Jamie, where it's not necessarily picking on him or bullying him in the same way that Hartnell's Doctor occasionally would, but it feels more friendly, you know?
Like brothers almost.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely feels very companionable. And I use that term, you know, of course, in the full meaning, because, you know, Jamie is in the role of companion there. But it really does feel very close.
that's
in that sense.
And that's on the close friendship between Troughton and Hines.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of scenes where their own real life friendship just bleeds through the screen.
And when he says things to, especially in this particular story, when he says stuff to Victoria as well, it doesn't feel misogynistic, even though there is so much misogyny in this serial that we haven't even touched on. But it doesn't really feel like it's coming from the Doctor. The other men in the story really treat Victoria horribly, but the Doctor does not. The Doctor just seems confident in her abilities.
He trusts her. He even says, "Hey, I need you to stay up here." Not, at first he says, to keep you safe. Doctor, I can take care of myself. Okay, I need you to watch the bad guy. Can you do that for me?
Yeah, I mean, he says it kind of more loudly, like, I need you to stay up here to keep you safe. And it kind of sounds initially like, I need you to stay up here because you're a fragile little woman. But when she's like, I am perfectly capable, he leans in and he's like, I know that woman over there is the bad guy. You need to watch her. She is going to mess with levers and stuff if you are not here. Watch the bad guy, And then she's like, oh, bad guy. Yeah, gotcha, can do. But the other men, sometimes even Jamie a little bit, but less so. But definitely the men in the expedition are immediately like, all right, women and minorities over there in the corner, let us white men handle this, which is just the worst. I mean,
and it's like, what did you do, Vic? I don't know, and don't call me Vic.
yeah, there are two guys that I was just like, I want a Cyberman to come out here and just absolutely karate chop these two dudes in the neck, because they were just being so awful to Victoria, because they just kept going out here and being like, all right, little lady, stand over there in the corner. And they called her Vic every single time. She was like, that is not my name. I do not like that. Call me Victoria. That is my name. And no matter how many times she said it, they were like, all right, Vic, go over there and make us some coffee, sweetie. Like, oh.
If they had called her Vicky, she might have thrown hands.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted her to. I was like, I'm sure there's a gun in the room. I'd be okay with that.
There was a gun in the room.
No, I mean, I know. I'm like, I've seen several guns in this room. Please just go pick one up and just wave it in their vague direction at the very least. Like,
I'm okay with that. Cyber gun. The cyber gun seems to work the best, which, plays into the final episode here.
Yeah, throw a Cyberman at them. It'll be okay. But yeah, there's just those two guys. Like, I had such animosity towards them by the end of it. I was like, please, somebody pick one of those guys up and throw him at the other guy. But speaking of picking up, there is one hilarious point where a Cyberman picks up Toberman, and you can see the wire that is attached to Toberman in order for the stuntman to lift him up into the air. And it is so bad. And it's not even like you catch a glimpse of it for a second. It's just like they didn't even care. It was like, what? There's going to be 6-year-olds watching this. They are not even going to notice.
They made no effort to have it blend into his clothing, because he's wearing a white shirt for the first few episodes before the cyber conversion. He's wearing a white shirt and the cable is jet black.
Yeah, and you can see it like the whole harness belt. I mean, it's just so hilarious that you could see like the stuntman is not even lifting his weight as he goes up into the air. Like, it's so funny. Oh, it's so funny.
Which is worse, that or later where Toberman and the Cybermen wrestle off screen and all of a sudden he comes back with a dummy that he throws.
Oh, yeah, that dummy has absolutely no weight to it. Like, what's so funny is because of the earlier scene, I was expecting to see another wire. And so I was looking for the wire because I thought it was just going to be like him holding a human up, like, still the same stunt guy. And instead, he just hurls this like 2 pound, if that, like just floppy dummy. Like they didn't manage to give it any rigidity or any weight as he like throws it across the room into a console. And I was like, oh my goodness, what is that thing made out of? Balloons? Like it's just.
But it's still a better effect than the paper doll that falls into the acid back in the Daleks.
Yeah, that was really funny, but yeah, it was so hilarious that dummy. I was like, oh man, that was just the worst. Um, but at least earlier when they had the scene where the dummy Cyberman gets shot, it was supposed to be a dummy Cyberman. Like they were like, oh no no no, this is not a real Cyberman. It's just a target used for weapons practice. And you're like, oh okay, that's why it looked so bad. But those two were supposed to be, real things, and it just you're like, oh, I love old Doctor Who with the crappy special effects. It's so adorable.
It's kind of charming going back to these old ones with the what they were able to stretch their budget for, and even that is considered going over budget.
Yeah, I know. You know that there was somebody just off camera, like blowing up balloons and stuffing them into a Cyberman costume and be like, shut up, it's all we have the budget for. Oh, so cute. And the fact that they have a rocket ship that they came in that we never see because they can't afford it.
That gadget gets torn up by the Cyberman, so that now they're stuck there again, riding away so that that no one can escape.
Yeah, and they just keep having people like run out the door and be like, our rocket ship is broken. You'll have to trust us because we can't show you a set or anything. It's like,
Not even because we spent the model money on the Cyberman tomb.
yeah. So I mean the sets actually do look really good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give them that. I mean they blew the production on the tomb set, which is all icy, and there's like a whole big three or four tiered set that the Cybermen can climb up and down and all that. I mean, that looks really good. I'm not gonna fault them. I was like, that's a really good looking set. But there's a whole thing where they were like, oh yeah, how did they get here? Rocket ship, where is it? It's off camera. Just have them run in the door and be like, rocket ship. We don't even see the exterior of the TARDIS in this one because they couldn't afford the effect to show it landing, so you just hear the noise and the actors run from off screen. But yeah, it's such a fun little story, and we get the introduction of so many important things in the history of the Cybermen. We get the cyber controller, we get the first cybermats, and the cybermats are so cute. They are adorable in this episode. They don't really do anything, and you don't really understand what they're for.
Yeah, I mean, even the Doctor has trouble describing them. Oh, that's a Cyberman. Well, what's a Cyberman? I'll explain later.
Yeah, and then he never does.
Oh, they read brainwaves and go after people. Well, then what? I don't know, but we got to make sure they don't do that to us.
They, at one point, it like attacks one of the villains, and at one point there's a couple of them that start chasing the Doctor, and he has to set up a electrical barrier, and um
And there's a nice little gag like, hey, we gave them a mental breakdown. Oh, doctor. Jamie is not impressed with the doctor's dad jokes.
Yeah. The thing is that we have to talk about the elephant in the room. You know, you called the doctor and Jamie's relationship kind of brotherly, which a lot of people have said it's probably not. And this episode contains one of the most infamous kind of things.
When they're holding hands.
Yeah, when they both of them reach out to grab Victoria's hand to like calm her and stuff, and they end up grabbing each other's hand. That was kind of put in there by the actors because, you know, like you said, they're friends. And they were known throughout the series for kind of putting in things that suggested that maybe Tu and Jamie's relationship was not quite as platonic as it was supposed to be on a BBC Kids show. At least that's the rumor, but the thing we do know that they have confirmed was that little bit about them grabbing each other's hands in there was absolutely intentional, and they did it at that point because they knew that due to the shooting schedule of that day and how tight it was and everything, that mistake, quote unquote, was not going to have time to be reshot.
I mean, we talked about this in the first Doctor episode we did. There was no take two.
Yeah, by this point, they were a little less strict on that. They would retake certain things, but not always. You know, it was kind of if they had time or if it was such a horrible, you know, thing that they could not put it in a kids show, you know. But tiny little things like that, sometimes they would just have to leave it in. And so apparently sometimes Troughton and Hines were known to kind of put in jokes or tiny little things like that just because they were bored and felt like doing it, is supposedly the rumor. So yeah, a lot of people think that that maybe Tu and Jamie might have had a different relationship than the one that was officially scripted.
It's a lot of lonely nights in the TARDIS.
Yeah. So, and I think that Troughton and Hines did just specifically kind of play into that for whatever means that
there's
they.
Quite a few pictures of Troughton without his shirt on, and Hines is just having his legs wrapped around him. So, on and off screen, they're just playing that up.
Yeah, and honestly, I find that really hilarious, and I kind of love that they did that. You know, it's really an adorable. You know, however you want to read that relationship, it is one of the best relationships in Doctor Who because of the way that episodes were shot. Fraser Hines ended up appearing in more episodes than any other companion. So that will probably never be broken just because of the difference in the way the show is shot now.
I mean, next season is only going to be 8 episodes.
Yeah, I mean,
so we're never going to have another 40-plus episode season in Doctor Who ever again.
Yeah. Like you said, Jamie did stay with the Doctor all the way up until he was forced to regenerate from the second Doctor into the third. And then Jamie is said to be sent back by the Time Lords to his own time and has his memory wiped.
Yeah, when we get to the final Second Doctor episode, the final Second Doctor story, the War Games, that's what they end up doing. They take Jamie and the companion at the time, Zoe. They are returned the moment they left, and most of their memories. They remember they remember meeting the Doctor. They remember the first adventure with the Doctor, but they don't remember anything else. It was their compromise with the Doctor. We'll let them remember your first adventure with them, but we can't let them remember anything else. So he remembers that first adventure, and then he wakes up, and then it's back to the battle.
Yeah, we don't really know what happened to him after that. He gets mentioned a couple of times by other doctors, and the last time, as of now, that he's been mentioned in the series proper was when David Tennant's Doctor uses the alias James McCrimmon when he finds himself in Scotland in the episode Tooth and Claw, and David Tennant just reverts to his natural Scottish accent for the episode. So it's a nice little nod. Although some of the tie-in media has brought up Jamie and given him various stories of what happened to him, but none of them actually jive with each other. So
wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. Doctor Who has no canon.
Yeah,
that's my official thing. But yeah, I mean, he's still Fraser Hines is still active in expanded media. He was such good friends with Patrick Troughton. He can do a flawless Troughton impression and voice the Second Doctor in several audio adventures. So yeah. As for Victoria, after she would stay with the Doctor for a little while, up until the episode Fury from the Deep, where, as I've mentioned, Victoria is a teenager. She is still, in some respects, a child, and all of this adventures and excitement and, let's be real, death takes its toll on her, and she just doesn't want to travel anymore. And she ends up staying with a couple with no child some point in the 20th century. And
the last time we hear about her as far as the official canon of the show is in the Two Doctors serial, where they mention that she's traveling with the Second Doctor, but you never see her on screen. As for
this story,
this story,
I mean, Klieg is killed just by a random Cyberman. He's not even killed by the Cyber Controller.
Well, yeah, because Toberman killed the Cyber Controller, or threw a dummy that was supposed to be the Cyber Controller.
Yeah. Capkin is killed by the Cyber Controller with the Cyberman gun, which seemingly snaps Toberman out of whatever control the Cyberman had on him. And I said before, the Doctor has to walk him through morality. That's that's again,
Cybermen evil, we kill evil, you kill Cybermen, whatever.
But there's a nice, even for 1960s, there's a great effect where Toberman like rips one of the Cybermen up, and like this foam just starts coming out of him, out of the Cyberman, and it's, for 1960s, that's not a bad effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Doctor wants to refreeze the Cybermen, this time, quote, for good, but needs someone to close the door as they re-electrify the door.
This time, anybody that touches the door won't just get a shock like the guy at the beginning, because he got a shock, but he survived. And the doctor's like, no, this time I'm making it fatal. You touch the door, you die. And it turns out that one of the Cybermats finds the cyber controller and revives it, so I guess that's what the Cybermats do in this story. And the cyber controller tries to open the door, and the doctor and Jamie aren't strong enough to keep the door closed. They're trying to push it closed with like pieces of wood they found.
But Toberman, who was already pretty strong, is now more strong because he's also partially cyber converted. And Toberman sacrifices himself to close the tomb of the Cybermen, locking them in there seemingly forever. R.I.P. Toberman.
And he does kind of have a good like you shall not pass ending, where he like screams at the cyber controller like, you will not get past Toberman or whatever,
The cyber controller is seemingly destroyed. He also gets the electric shock. Amazingly enough, this actually gets that particular cyber controller comes back in, I believe, a Sixth Doctor story. Maybe someone correct me if I'm wrong. Which is weird that they decided that far ahead into the story that we're going to take this particular cyber controller and have him come back. But yeah, Toberman closes the door. He gets electrocuted. He dies. He sacrifices himself.
And everybody just goes like, oh, well, that was a shame. Anyway, moving on. It's really sad, like how quickly they're like, well, he's dead. That sucks. Moving on.
Well, we got the ship fixed. We can now leave. We can give you guys a ride if you want. We have our own ship. We can get out of here fine.
Yeah.
But one Cyberman survives, and seemingly that these Cybermen will return, and they would return just a few months later in the episode Wheel in Space, and would continue to return to this very day. For all its problems, Tomb of the Cybermen is actually a pretty good story, and it's a nice story to introduce someone to the black and white era of Doctor Who. For years prior to, this was one of those lost episodes up until about the early 90s. And up until the early 90s, there was this legend behind this episode. People who were kids when they saw this episode said how great it is and how it's one of the greatest episodes of that era. Do I agree with it? I haven't seen enough Troughton to actually say so. But if I were to introduce someone, if someone came up to me and say, I want to know about the black and white era of Doctor Who, I would probably show them this episode first because it tells you everything you need to know. The first 5 minutes is just a straight introduction of the show and the concept. This is the TARDIS. We use it to travel in time and space. You are from Victorian England. He is from the Scottish Highlands. I am an alien from outer space. We are going on an adventure. These are the Cybermen. They are bad. We must stop them.
Yeah, honestly, this was the beginning of a new season,
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of, I guess, under the idea of like, well, this might be a lot of people's jumping on board spot.
Which is strange for classic Who, as usually when they, even in season premieres, they just jump right into the story. For them to make the effort of reintroducing these characters to the audience, I commend them for that. And again, yeah. So if you are curious about the black and white era of Doctor Who, this is a good place to start.
Yeah, and, there are some problematic spots. We said, yeah. Not so great on the racial angle, not so great on the treatment of women, but less problematic than some other stories in that area.
Again, there's no brown face, there's no yellow face, so yay.
Yeah. The thing is that I think that other than a few small things in the story, like I think one of the villains could be fleshed out a little bit more. I think that at least one of the villains worked really well. The story was pretty comprehensible and kept moving. For a 4-part serial, it didn't drag too much, which is good. Some of the serials just drag on way too long.
Especially if those are like 6 episodes or more. Oh.
Yeah. So this one was fairly tight and had a lot of good cliffhangers in there, especially that one part where you're watching the Cybermen climb out of the tomb. That's a really good one. And good sets, and a couple of special effects don't hold up, but most of them are pretty good for no budget 60s BBC. So yeah,
of course,
I would definitely recommend this. Yeah.
Troughton would stay on with Doctor Who for 3 seasons, and his own words were he didn't want to get typecast, so that's why he left. And that was the advice he would give to later Doctor Who Peter Davison: 3 seasons, get out. Which, maybe Tom Baker might have should have listened to that one, but we'll get to that when we get there. But, he didn't want to be typecast as Doctor Who for the rest of his life, so he wanted 3 seasons, get out. And he would eventually leave in the final story, The War Games, with same episode that Jamie left. Had his forced regeneration at the trial, at his trial by the Time Lords. And when we next talk about Doctor Who, it will be the 3rd Doctor, John Pertwee. Definitely looking forward to that. That will be sometime. That will be about a month from now. But as for next week, we're kind of staying in this type of sci-fi vibe, as we're going to be taking a look at Disney's latest film, Strange World. And that is going to be a very interesting thing to talk about. Again, the movie just came out like a month or so ago. All right, so come back next week for Strange World, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic,
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic,
and of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it.
If you want to help the fight for human rights in the U.S., the American Civil Liberties Union works to protect constitutional rights for all Americans. Their website is aclu.org. If you need reproductive services in the U.S. or wish to donate to those who do, go to abortionfunds.org for more info. The battle isn't over until the last person surrenders. The fight continues.